Coming to paperback and e-readers this April, Isis, the main event. It's carnage inside of a steel cage as the goddess next door steps in the squared circle against the beast from the falls in this all-new Isis series adventure. Get Isis, the main event, this April. I've been a fan of AEW, or All Elite Wrestling, ever since it started last year. And I've enjoyed the wrestling that goes on AEW Dynamite on Wednesday nights and the night before on Tuesday with AEW Dark. And while the shows are rock solid overall, there is one weak point in AEW's league, and that is the AEW's women's division. Now, the big problem with the AEW women's division has to do with their creative, because the roster of AEW women's talent is rock solid, from your Awesome Kong to your Chris Statlander to your Emi Sakura, a seasoned veteran of Japanese wrestling, to your Hikaru Shida, to your Big Swole, and your B. Priestley, and your Dr. Britt Baker, and the champion Rio. The entire AEW women's roster has a rock-solid foundation of very talented women who can put on very solid matches from what I've seen so far. Unfortunately, they haven't had that story that can energize people to get behind them in the seats and make them connect with these great talented women, because the bookers just aren't writing them that story that gets us excited about them the way we get excited about the guys. Now, when you look at Chris Jericho and the Inner Circle and their feud with Cody Rhodes and the Elite, it's very compelling because it answers three questions every good booker or screenwriter has to answer. And those questions are: who are the main characters? What do they want? And why should we care? Now, that third question is the most important one, because that's the question that will get people to buy tickets for a wrestling show, and it is the question that, when you answer it, keeps people watching that wrestling show and being invested in it all the way up to the pay-per-view. Now, the women's division has not really done a good job of answering that question, and if you can't answer that question, you're going to have a weak spot in your show. And that's what's happened with AEW's women's division, is we don't have that story that makes us care about these talented wrestlers, and there is no story to energize people to get behind these wrestlers, to get excited about them, in spite of the amazing work they have put on in most of their matches. So that's the big problem with AEW's women's division, is that there is no creative there to lay a solid foundation to get us excited about the AEW women the same way we get excited about the AEW guys. Now, the big problem I see with the AEW women's division is that there is no real focus on the prize, which is the AEW women's title. Now, any good wrestling league, like your NWA, they make the 10 pounds of gold the primary focus, and they make the champ somebody that everybody wants to chase and believes that they can defeat. And the big problem with AEW's champ Rio is, while she is a very skilled wrestler, there is no spark or charisma to get us excited about her matches, to make us say, I really like this person, I really want to see this person again, and I really care about this person. And that's the big problem with AEW's women's division, is that they don't really have anybody there that really makes you say that up front in the championship main event level, that makes you care as related to the women's division. There are talents there like B. Priestley. She was putting on some very solid matches, and she had the mic work to go along with it, but they have AEW has not really put her to the forefront to be the person who could make us care. She is the person I see that could make you care about AEW's women's division, because she is a solid ring worker and her mic work is rock solid. And she's also a heel, and being a heel is very, very something that they need to help propel the women's division to make you care, because when you have a heel female champ, what that does is it leads to someone that the faces chase after while they're trying to get the title. And it makes the title the primary focus of the show. And when the title is the primary focus of a division, then the viewers have a reason to care about the women's division. So that's the big problem, as I see it, with AEW, is that you have a champ that really, while she's technically solid, just isn't making you care. And then you have bookers who just aren't building a story around your wrestlers to make us care about them. Yes, they're having matches and they're great matches, but there's no story there to draw you in and make you want to spend 10 to 20 minutes watching the women's division. And because there's no story, there are no feuds being built up, and there's no heat being generated. Now, again, with the B. Priestley and Dr. Britt Baker feud that was starting, there was a bit of a heat with that, but unfortunately, AEW squashed that heat, and instead of the heat building in the women's division, it went back to nowhere because they didn't let that story continue to grow and develop, and they didn't take the time to let other stories start to build. They were introducing stars, but they didn't let the feuds build organically. Now, the saddest part about the AEW women's division transpired this Wednesday on AEW Dynamite, where the women's division hit an all-time low, and this all-time low was due to the Brandy Rhodes Nightmare Collective angle, which really has not really taken off overall, and that bad angle creeped into a very solid match between your Chris Statlander and Riho, and it prevented us from seeing this exciting match, which was looking like it was building to be a very, very another solid match with no story, but it was looking like it was getting ready to build into something solid until this horrible Nightmare Collective angle came in and practically destroyed all of the momentum of a very solid match, and practically destroyed all of the angles as related to the entire women's division. The entire women's division at AEW at this point is at, as I see it, a really bad place due to this whole Brandy Rhodes Nightmare Collective angle, which has really done a bad job of using Awesome Kong and has really practically gone nowhere and has dragged down the whole AEW women's division and prevented it from actualizing its potential. But I do see a way out of this for the AEW women's division, but they have to, again, focus on some stars that actually can use the microphone, like your Chris Statlander. She can use the microphone. Use your B. Priestley, who can use the microphone, and really let these women talk so that they can generate some heat with the audience and start getting over with the audience and having them feud with each other so that people can get into the matches and there's no weak point that leads to people clicking out of what is usually a rock solid show. Now, the women's division is a weak point, but again, it is a point that can be fixed if AEW focuses on it and uses its talent in properly and books them in a story that makes us care. And this is the big problem with AEW overall, is that they have not made a story for their women's division that makes us care, and they have not taken the talent in the AEW women's division and used it in a way that makes us care. And again, it's really sad because they have the talent there and they're putting on rock solid matches that are on the pay-per-view level, but they're just not booking the matches in a way that makes the talent stand out and stand out distinctly, because the writers just don't know how to write a compelling story for them the same way they do for the guys. But the talent is there, and if they had a solid writer, they could make a rock solid women's division that would be on the level of the TNA Knockouts back in the day, or the WOW Women of Wrestling or Shimmer. The talent is there to have a division on that level, but it just requires that AEW go out of its way to get its booking on point. And that's something Tony Khan needs to do, because if you have weak spots in your show like there were on Wednesday, with the Nightmare Collective being in an absolutely horrifically awful angle and a horrifically awful segment that destroys a match, or that Dark Order whole storyline that's practically going nowhere. This is the stuff that can lead to a promising wrestling league going into a decline and leading to people walking away from a show because your bookers just want to hold on to a bad story and want to try to finish a bad story and double down on a bad story that the audience just doesn't care about. So when you have a story that just isn't working, sometimes you just have to put a period at the end of it and then start fresh. And I believe with what AEW needs to do is put a period at the end of the Nightmare Collective angle and then start fresh with the women's division and start focusing on making the AEW Women's Championship the primary focus, because I could care less about the Nightmare Collective, but I want to care about the AEW Women's Championship, and I want to see rock solid wrestling continue on in a division that looks like it could be one of the best women's leagues overall. If you'd like to see me make more videos like this, you can donate to my Patreon, my PayPal, or my Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. And if you want to pick up some of my SJS Direct publications featuring heroines like the ISIS series, the E-Steam series, and the Spinsterella trilogy, you may do so by clicking the link to Amazon.com. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.
Coming to paperback and e-readers this March, John Haynes, the man with nothing to lose. The man who rules the world runs into the irresistible force of a man with nothing to lose in this action-packed, all-new John Haynes series adventure. Get the regular and variant cover editions of John Haynes, the man with nothing to lose this March.